Start of the 2021 season is just around the corner for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and we're here to give our game-by-game predictions. No changing them from here, boys. We're locking them here now, and that's it. Just kidding. It's kind of hard to project and predict games this far in advance, especially looking at like UNC October 30th. What does the Notre Dame football team look like in 2 months from now? But heck, we're going to do this for fun. I'm Mike Singer. Below me is Tyler Horka and Patrick Engel there at the bottom. So we're going to go game by game, give our predictions. So let's take a look first at Florida State. Patrick Engel's prediction. He's got the Fighting Irish coming out with the W. Tyler Horka with the dub. And myself, I'm going with Notre Dame to win on the road at Florida State. Notre Dame's about an 8-point favorite, though, Patrick. What are you thinking this one might be closer than the experts think? Do you like Notre Dame by double digits? What are you guys kind of thinking?
I want nothing to do with that betting line. I've seen it between 6 and 9, not touching it. Feel like this one can be closer just because opener is Notre Dame going to be at its optimal level. I'm not sure, but even if it's not, I think it has enough to beat Florida State, which you can ask the same questions about. And I think you look at their optimal level, especially on offense, as being lower than Notre Dame's.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of that game, probably the first half, there's going to be a lot of people who took Notre Dame on that betting line, and they're going to be saying, man, did I make a massive mistake here? I think it could be a one-score game at halftime, but in the end, I think Notre Dame will cover. I do think maybe a defensive touchdown will turn the game around or something will happen just to kind of change the momentum of the game. I really think it's going to be one of those games that starts out sluggish for Notre Dame, especially in a season opener on the road against a pretty big program. I know Florida State's not what it has been in the past right now, but I do think just kind of with it being the season opener and Notre Dame being on the road, it's going to stay close for a while, but in the end, they'll pull it out.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I especially with Patrick, I would stay away from this betting line. You think about Louisville in 2019, Duke in 2020. Notre Dame did not have great games in those openers. Even the 2018 season, Notre Dame was not off to a great. I mean, obviously the Michigan game, they started fast, ended the game poorly, kind of snuck out of there with that win. Then you remember the Ball State game. Just early in the season, I'm kind of hesitant on Notre Dame, but do feel like they're going to come out with this victory. Toledo at home. Yeah, we're all going with victories there. I don't think we have anything to add. Toledo is a fine group of five school, but don't feel like they're going to be much of a challenge for Notre Dame. Purdue, how about that? In-state game at home. Yep, we're all going with victories. Now we're going to Wisconsin. First loss potentially of the season. That's what Patrick Engel's projecting as of right now. Patrick, why are you thinking loss there for Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, I have to go. My season record prediction is 10-2, and I've got to go somewhere. And with Wisconsin, I'm not really buying that their 4-3 record last year is what's to come or indicative of some slip. I think they've got a good running back that can emerge in Jalen Berger, former top 100 recruit. Graham Mertz, even in last year's struggles as their quarterback, certainly some moments where you look and say, all right, that's what it's supposed to look like. A lot of returning defensive production and skill there. I'm going to take Wisconsin narrowly over Notre Dame.
And then a win predicted by Tyler Horka. What are you thinking about this game? The Jack Cohn Bowl, if you will.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just about to say. There's not anybody on the Notre Dame roster who wants to win that game as much as Jack Cohn does. And Jack Cohn's going to go out, probably have one of his best games of the season. And I just really think that Jack Cohn's going to show up for that. And that'll only be his fourth game at Notre Dame in his career. And just to get a win that big, that early, that's what I can kind of envision for Jack Cohn right now.
I'm going to give my prediction here. It's a loss. I'm not going to detail it yet because if I do, it'll kind of spoil the rest of my predictions here, guys. So I'm just going to throw it. I got a loss against Wisconsin, and we will move on. Cincinnati. If the Wisconsin game was the Jack Cohn Bowl, now we got the Marcus Freeman Bowl, and Mike Mickens, Chad Bowden, all those former Cincinnati, Brian Kelly too, Notre Dame guys that were formerly at Cincinnati. Patrick Engel projecting a win. Tyler Horka, you think the Irish trip up at home? I've got a win for the Irish. Think there's just a different level of athlete. What are you kind of thinking about, 6 weeks, 5 weeks in advance of this game.
Yeah, I mentioned Jack Cohn and how badly he's going to want to win that Wisconsin game. Like you said, there's plenty of guys at Notre Dame who are going to want to win that Cincinnati game, starting with Brian Kelly. That's the reason he's at Notre Dame right now, is because of what he did at Cincinnati, leading an undefeated regular season. So I just think that there's a lot going on within the Notre Dame program as it relates to Cincinnati on all those ties. And just kind of thinking of all that's a lot of off the field stuff to worry about. And then you actually get on the field, and Cincinnati's a pretty good team. They have Desmond Ridder, a quarterback that you have to look out for both in the passing game and the running game. He's got a lot of really good skill guys around him. There's some guys on the defensive end of that team that can make a lot of plays. So I think Luke Fickell is going to want to beat Marcus Freeman in that game, obviously. So I think it's going to be a really close one. But if you look at that schedule and there's a game that you have to pick that Notre Dame's going to lose at home, I think that one is pretty high up on the list.
Any thoughts there, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a slugfest where someone can win this thing with 21 to 24 points in there. I think I just ultimately trust Notre Dame's defense just a little bit more, although Cincinnati, still a lot of dudes that Marcus Freeman leaves behind there.
Moving along here, second true road game of the season, October 9th at Virginia Tech. Patrick Engel projecting a win. Back-to-back losses. That's how Tyler Horka feels right now. See the reaction there from him. We actually did at the end of July kind of projections for different things during the season. One of those was upset losses. I actually felt that this would be one that Notre Dame could trip up at that no one's really talking about. For the sake of this, though, I've got Notre Dame with the W. I'm going to kick it back to you, Tyler. Put you on the hot seat. Why are you thinking that this one could be a loss for Notre Dame?
I'm not really comfortable in predicting back-to-back losses, obviously, but you could kind of spin that and say, okay, if Notre Dame does lose that game to Cincinnati, how do they bounce back from their first loss of the season? Now you got to go on the road to a place like Virginia Tech that's been pretty historically hard to win at. So it's not completely outlandish to say that Notre Dame is going to lose back-to-back games. It's possible, probably not probable, but again, I said when speaking of the Cincinnati game, if you look at that schedule, which of those home games is Notre Dame most likely to trip up in? Cincinnati's high on the list. And then you look at the true road games, of which there's only 4. Which of those is Notre Dame susceptible of losing? Maybe the season opener, but Florida State's, by all accounts, not that great. Literally, it's just because it's the season opener at Florida State is the reason you'd say maybe Notre Dame struggles there. Virginia Tech might be number 2 on that list, if not number 1 in terms of difficulty of road games. So I think Notre Dame is going to lose 2 or 3 games this season. I predicted 9-3 in that roundtable that you mentioned earlier in the offseason.
Don't give away your prediction just yet.
I'm not going to give
more games.
The rest of my picks, but I mean, you look at those road games. Virginia Tech probably the hardest one on there.
Yeah, I know this is the popular upset, whatever pick. Oh, Lane Stadium, Enter Sandman, everything. Miss me with all of that. Let me read the teams that have gone into that full stadium, so not counting last year, and beaten Virginia Tech. 5-7 Duke in 2019 won by 35, and that team couldn't score. Barely beat Furman that same year, by the way, did Virginia Tech. 7-6 Georgia Tech went in there in 2018, beat them by 3 touchdowns. Boston College and Miami, both 7-win teams, went in there and beat Virginia Tech that year. Now, granted, yes, a lot of that has to do with Virginia Tech not being that good. But the whole home field advantage thing really takes a hit when that's the case. So give me Notre Dame by 10-plus points here. I'm not taking any of this upset stuff. I think Virginia Tech is going to be another mess. That's 6-win team tops.
They got that Oregon quarterback transfer. I think he's a good little player, but I think it'll be closer than the experts think, but not quite predicting an upset. USC, coming off of a bye. Notre Dame didn't play the Trojans in 2020. Of course, they had an exciting game against them in 2019 where the Irish went up big early, and then USC came back. Irish held on for the win. What are we thinking in this home game? We are going W's across the board. USC seems to be on the come up, as the kids would say a little bit, but I don't know, guys. I don't see USC coming in here on the road and winning this game. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I already predicted 1 home loss for Notre Dame. We've documented how good Notre Dame has been at home in the last few seasons. And, I mean, USC is kind of like the Super Bowl for Notre Dame, pretty much year in, year out. That's probably their biggest rival. other than Michigan, but we don't see Michigan on this schedule. So Notre Dame wants to beat USC. USC wants to beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame has the better roster, has the better coaching staff. I don't see any reason for the Fighting Irish to lose this game.
Yeah, I agree on most of that. I think it'll be close. I think USC will be able to move the ball. Ultimately, this seems like one where even if it's a one-score game, Notre Dame's defensive line feeling like they come up with a few plays late, put enough pressure on Keaton Slovis there to just prevent USC from being able to outscore Notre Dame.
All right, so we got Engel projecting so far through 7 games, 6-1. I've got 6-1. Tyler Horka at 5-2. Man, if Notre Dame does lose back-to-back games to Cincinnati and Virginia Tech, oh man, I will not want to be on the loose emoji board. It will be in an interesting place to say the least. Let's move on to UNC. What is it, a pick'em right now, guys? I mean, that's going to be a heck of a battle. Notre Dame had an awesome road win there last season. Now Mac Brown and company come to Notre Dame Stadium. Patrick Engel projecting an L here. What are you kind of thinking? Sam Howell is maybe at this point, this is like his Heisman game. Is that kind of what you're thinking here? What's on your mind, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, they have an All-American quarterback who everyone on his offensive line returns. I think you'll see that group really take a step forward, and their inability really to block Notre Dame consistently last year is, I think, a lot of what went into Notre Dame being able to shut them down in the second half, even without Kyle Hamilton. And I know, yes, that's the thing. Well, Notre Dame shut them down without Kyle Hamilton in the second half on the road. What do you think they're going to do it at home? This is a new year. There's different parts of it. Howell's a year older and already I think he's the best quarterback Notre Dame's going to play this year. Again, I mentioned the increased protection. I know they lose a lot of the skill players. They still recruited some guys in there and even got a good grad transfer at running back in Ty Chandler, who are going to come in and I still think give Howell a lot of good weapons to throw to. Watch out for Josh Downs, receiver, former highly rated recruit who had a good bowl game in the Orange Bowl last year. So this one seems to me, I mean, look, I think Notre Dame loses one of those games to USC or North Carolina. I think I trust North Carolina just a little bit more.
Tyler Hork and I going with W's, as Tyler mentioned. Can't see Notre Dame losing 2 home games in the same season, right? So we both see wins. I think that North Carolina's probably got the better quarterback here, but I like Notre Dame's roster. You know, I think across the board Notre Dame's got the better football team. We'll kind of move along here. Navy. We have an upset predict. No, I'm just kidding. No upset here. On the road at Virginia, we got W's across the board. Georgia Tech, I'm hoping that the Yellow Jackets can. I think college football is fun when Georgia Tech is good, but don't see them making much of a run at Notre Dame. And this is kind of what we see from Notre Dame is November. They are just so good and win all these games. What about at Stanford? We are going with W's across the board. Stanford's been a little bit down here recently. So kind of went quick through them post North Carolina. So I've got 11-1, and this is where I want to touch on why I predicted an L at Wisconsin. There is no way in hell I'm picking a loss for Notre Dame at home. I'm just not going to do it. They haven't had a loss at home since 2017 against Georgia. I'm not predicting it. I think they're better than USC. And I think they're better at North Carolina. I'm not going to predict an undefeated season, though, because I do feel like they'll trip up somewhere. And it came down to 3 games for me. Virginia Tech, Wisconsin, and Florida State. And of those 3, I think Wisconsin's the best football team. I still think Notre Dame's better than Wisconsin. And maybe I just got some, like, blue and gold glasses on right now. I don't know. But I even though I think Notre Dame's a better team than Wisconsin, heck, it's any given Saturday. So, Patrick, am I crazy here? Like, am I just being a homer? Like, what do you think about my 11-1 projection?
I mean, I agree with you in that there's no one on the schedule that you look at and say, okay, they're appreciably better than Notre Dame, or a game like a Clemson last year where everybody's circling it as a loss. Obviously, of course, Notre Dame won that game. But yeah, I'm not sure we know yet or can say with the certainty yet that Notre Dame is talented enough to get by those 4 tough games against top 15-ish teams without slipping up at least once. I mean, that I picked the Wisconsin loss just because it seems like, okay, an offense that's still kind of getting its footing, has a lot of new pieces, just hits a good defense and, runs into a little bit of a speed bump. That happens, and I think we'll see that in this game in particular. I'm not sure I can quite go 11-1, although I feel a little bit better about what Notre Dame's ceiling can be on the whole after being able to watch some of training camp.
Another thing here is Notre Dame. What's kind of been the stigma about them nationally is they lose the big one. But what doesn't get talked about Notre Dame is that they don't trip up. Like post 2016, they do not trip up against teams that they're supposed to beat. I mean, you look at the losses since that disastrous 4-win season of 2016. Like they're all at least to respectable football teams, even if Notre Dame got blown out. Like they're losing games to Alabama and Clemson and Georgia. The Michigan game in 2019, just never want to think about that one again, especially if you're a Fighting Irish fan. So I just see Notre Dame at home, USC, UNC. To me, I feel like the Irish get up and win those games. Now, Tyler, when we were talking about our records here, I know you really wanted to go with 9-3, but you had an issue trying to find that third loss. It's a lot easier to say, well, I'm projecting 10-2 or I'm projecting 11-1. But then when you actually got to pick the game they lose, it can be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got those blue and gold shades on. Maybe I drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid. I don't know. But there's two things that I want to say pretty confidently. I do think that Notre Dame is going to lose a home game this year. Cincinnati's a decent pick if that's going to happen. I think it could also be UNC. I think could also be USC. But I think they're only going to lose one of those games. So when I had to come down and make a pick, I said Cincinnati. It just so happens that the other loss that I predicted is the very next week, which every time I look at those two L's just back to back right there, I'm thinking this is a Brian Kelly-led football team. There's a lot of really good players on both sides of the ball. The coaching staff is really revamped and energized, invigorated. When you have all of those things that come together, teams usually don't lose back-to-back games. So not very confident in that, but I do think that there is going to be another slip up somewhere. And obviously Patrick feels the same way. And at the end of it, it comes down to 10-2. So will it be Cincinnati and Virginia Tech? I don't know. That's what I had, when it came down to putting these predictions in, that's what I had. And that's what I came up with. But I think 10-2, I really do, is probably more likely than 11-1 at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think 11-1 is more likely than 9-3. I don't like the 9-win over under for Notre Dame. Like if I were a betting man and I'm not good at that, I would hit the over, which probably means you guys should hit the under. Any closing thoughts here, Patrick?
Yeah, I would take the over on the 9 wins, mainly because it's 9 flat and not 9.5. That extra half makes that
it's not going to be 8 wins. This is not going to be an 8-win season. Like Notre Dame is too good unless they just get decimated by injuries, right? Like I feel like that's a safe over bet because at worst, in my opinion, you push.
Yes, absolutely. I really have a hard time seeing how they don't, at least how you don't, or how you would lose money hitting that over. But yeah, I know we talked about how Notre Dame wins a lot of the games they're supposed to win. I think there's enough games on the schedule where, yes, the point spread says they're supposed to win, but it's a 2, 3, one score, enough of those one score type of spreads that, okay, I know some of these are for games 2 months out, but I think those will be relatively close to what the actual week of spread is. And I think there's a difference between those games, those closer to coin flip Notre Dame favorite games, than a home schedule that has games against more Purdue's or Georgia Tech's or
Sure.
Duke's or even Virginia Tech of 2019 or what have you. So I have them losing a home game here as well, and that's kind of my basis for it. Yes, I think Notre Dame is going to be favored against North Carolina unless something completely blows up, but that's probably going to be a 1 or 2 point favorite. And again, just not quite the same supposed to win game as a double-digit spread there. And as the great Lou Simoja used to say, there's always a white knuckler you don't expect that comes up on the season. For me, that's at Virginia. I think they're the better of the two Virginia teams on the schedule. I think Notre Dame wins that, but I'm not going to be surprised if we look up in the fourth quarter and that's a one-score game.
Well, that's going to do it for this video. There you have it. 10 wins projected here by Patrick Engel and Tyler Horka, even though Tyler's kind of confused. He's not sure if he wants to go with 9 or 10. I'm going 11-1, borderline playoff team, but probably just outside of that top 4. Appreciate you guys sticking around and watching this full video. Make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and go to blueandgold.com for all things Notre Dame football. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you next time.